The wagon train stretched across the Colorado plains like a serpent winding through tall grass, and Delilah Carson knew she was becoming the weakest link in the chain that bound these pioneers together as they headed toward California in the spring of 1868. Her lungs burned with each labored breath, her legs trembled beneath her worn calico dress, and the dust kicked up by dozens of boots and hooves coated her throat until she could barely swallow. She had been walking since dawn, same as everyone else, but while the others maintained their steady pace behind the creaking wagons, she found herself falling farther and farther behind. "Keep moving," her brother Daniel called over his shoulder without looking back. He walked alongside his wife Margaret and their 3 children, his attention fixed on keeping the family together. There was no malice in his voice, just the hard practicality that this journey demanded. They could not afford to slow down. They could not afford to wait. Delilah tried to quicken her steps, but her vision blurred at the edges. She had been ill 3 weeks ago with a fever that left her weak, and though she insisted she had recovered, her body told a different story. At 21 years old, she had always been strong, capable of working from sunup to sundown on their family farm back in Missouri. But the fever had stolen something from her, left her hollowed out like a rotten log that looked solid on the outside but crumbled at the slightest pressure. The wagon train master, a gruff man named Johnson, had already warned her twice. They could not slow the pace for one person. Spring was the only window they had to cross the mountains before winter snows made the passes impassable. Every day mattered. Every hour counted. She stumbled over a rock hidden in the grass and went down hard on her knees. Pain shot through her legs, but worse than the physical hurt was the knowledge that the gap between her and the others was widening. She could see them pulling away, the wagons rolling steadily forward, the other families keeping their rhythm. Nobody looked back. They could not afford to look back. Delilah pushed herself up, ignoring the blood seeping through the torn fabric at her knees. She took 3 more steps before her legs simply gave out beneath her. This time when she fell, she did not have the strength to rise immediately. She knelt there in the grass, watching her brother's wagon grow smaller, watching her last connection to family and safety disappear into the dust. Then she heard the horse. The sound of hooves came from behind her, a single rider moving at an easy pace. She turned her head, squinting against the afternoon sun, and saw him. A cowboy astride a dappled gray horse, sitting tall in the saddle with the kind of easy confidence that spoke of a man who had spent more of his life on horseback than on foot. He wore a dark hat pulled low over his eyes, a faded blue shirt, and leather chaps that had seen better days. A rifle rested in a scabbard tied to his saddle, and a coiled rope hung from his saddle horn. As he drew closer, she could make out more details. He was young, maybe 25 or 26, with a strong jaw covered in a few days' worth of stubble. His eyes were a striking shade of gray-green, the color of sage after rain, and they studied her with an intensity that made her acutely aware of how pathetic she must look kneeling in the dirt. "You all right, miss?" His voice was deep, with the slight drawl of someone who had grown up in the territories. "I'm fine," she lied, trying once more to stand. Her legs shook violently, and she would have fallen again if he had not dismounted in one smooth motion and caught her elbow. "Easy now," he said. His grip was firm but gentle. "Does not look fine to me." "The wagon train," she gasped, gesturing toward the distant line of wagons. "I need to catch up. They cannot wait." He glanced toward the disappearing train, then back at her. Something shifted in his expression, a decision being made behind those sage-colored eyes. "They already left you behind." The words hit her like a physical blow because they were true. Her brother had not stopped. The wagon master had not halted the train. They had continued on without her, and somewhere in the past few minutes, she had crossed from being part of the group to being abandoned. "I can catch up," she insisted, but even as she said it, her body betrayed her. Her vision swam, and she felt herself tilting sideways. The cowboy caught her before she hit the ground, sweeping her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing at all. "When did you last eat?" she tried to remember. Yesterday, the day before. Food had been scarce, and she had given most of her portions to her nieces and nephews. "I am not hungry." "That was not what I asked." He carried her to his horse and somehow managed to lift her into the saddle despite her weak protests. "Name is Warren Wheeler, and you are Delilah Carson." The world tilted dangerously, and she gripped the saddle horn to keep from sliding off. "Please, I need to get back to the train." Warren swung up behind her, his arm coming around her waist to steady her. "What you need is water and food and rest. That train is not stopping, Miss Carson. I have been tracking it for 2 days, and Johnson does not slow down for anything." "But my brother—" "Your brother kept walking." There was no judgment in his voice, just statement of fact. "Now you have got a choice. You can try to kill yourself chasing after people who already decided you are not worth waiting for, or you can let me help you." Delilah wanted to argue, wanted to insist that Daniel would realize she was missing and come back for her. But deep in her heart, she knew the truth. Daniel had his own family to worry about. The wagon master had made it clear that anyone who could not keep pace would be left behind. She had become a liability, and in the harsh mathematics of survival on the frontier, liabilities were expendable. "Why would you help me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You do not know me." Warren was quiet for a moment, guiding his horse away from the trail the wagon train had followed. "Because I know what it is to be left behind. And I know what it is to have someone slow down and walk beside you when the whole world seems determined to leave you in the dust." He rode them to a small creek about a mile from the main trail, a spot sheltered by cottonwood trees and out of the worst of the wind. Delilah was barely conscious when he lifted her down from the horse, her body finally giving up the fight it had been waging for weeks. She was vaguely aware of being laid on something soft, of cool water touching her lips, of a blanket being tucked around her shoulders. When she woke, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. She was lying on a bedroll beneath one of the cottonwood trees, covered with a thick wool blanket that smelled of horse and leather and something else, something distinctly masculine. A small fire crackled nearby, and Warren sat beside it, stirring something in a small pot. "Welcome back," he said when he noticed her eyes open. "How are you feeling?" Delilah took inventory of her body. The shaking had stopped. The fog in her mind had lifted somewhat. She was desperately thirsty and hungry enough that the smell from the pot made her stomach cramp. "Better," she admitted. He ladled some of the contents into a tin cup and brought it over to her, kneeling beside the bedroll. "It is just beans and some salt pork, but it will put some strength back in you. Can you sit up?" She managed to push herself upright, though her arms trembled with the effort. Warren handed her the cup and a spoon, watching as she took her first tentative bite. The food was simple, probably would have seemed bland under normal circumstances, but to her starving body it tasted better than anything she could remember. "Slowly," he cautioned when she started eating too fast. "Your stomach needs time to adjust." Delilah forced herself to slow down, taking small bites and chewing thoroughly. Between mouthfuls, she studied the man who had rescued her. In the fading light, she could see the lines of his face more clearly, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the weathered quality of his skin that spoke of years spent under the sun and wind. His hands were rough, calloused from hard work, but they had been gentle when they touched her. "Thank you," she said finally, "for stopping, for helping me." Warren shrugged, poking at the fire with a stick. "Like I said, I have been where you are." "What happened?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he sighed and settled back against a tree trunk. "I was 16. My father and I were part of a cattle drive heading north from Texas. I got sick, some kind of stomach ailment that laid me flat. The trail boss told my father he could stay with me or keep moving, but the herd was not stopping. My father chose the herd." Delilah sucked in a sharp breath. "He left you." "He left me with a canteen and a blanket and told me to catch up when I could." Warren's voice was matter-of-fact, but she could hear the old hurt beneath the words. An older cowboy named Samuel West was riding drag at the back of the herd. He saw what happened. That evening, after the herd was settled, he came back for me, stayed with me for 3 days until I was strong enough to ride, then helped me catch up to the drive. "What happened to your father?" "He did not speak to me for the rest of the drive. When we got to Kansas, I took my pay and never looked back. Samuel became more of a father to me than my own blood ever was. He taught me everything about being a cowboy, about reading the land and the sky, about survival." Warren paused, staring into the fire. "He died 2 years ago. Got thrown from his horse and broke his neck. Before he passed, he made me promise something." "What?" "That if I ever saw someone being left behind, I would be the one to slow down and walk beside them, just like he did for me." Warren looked at her then, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "So that is why I stopped, Miss Carson. Because I made a promise to a man who saved my life, and I intend to keep it." Delilah felt tears prick her eyes. She had spent so much of the past few weeks feeling like a burden, like dead weight dragging everyone else down. Her brother's impatience, the wagon master's cold warnings, the other families barely concealed relief when she could not keep up. They had all confirmed what she had started to believe about herself, that she was not worth the trouble. But this stranger had stopped. He had turned around when everyone else kept moving forward. He had chosen her over the easier path of riding on alone. "I do not know how I will ever repay you," she said softly. "Do not need repayment. Just get your strength back." He stood and moved back to the fire, refilling the cup with more beans. "We will rest here tonight and see how you are feeling in the morning. There is a town called Leadville about 3 days' ride west of here. It is a mining town, been growing fast since they found silver in the area. Might be you could find work there, start fresh." "What about the wagon train?" "My brother," Warren handed her the second cup of food. "Miss Carson, you need to ask yourself something. Do you want to chase after people who did not care enough to wait for you? Or do you want to build a life somewhere new, on your own terms?" It was a question she had been avoiding, but now it stared her in the face, demanding an answer. Daniel was her only living family. Their parents had died of cholera 3 years ago, leaving the farm to Daniel. He had taken her in, given her a place to stay, but she had always felt like an outsider in his household. Margaret was kind enough, but the message was clear that Delilah was extra, an addition they had not planned for and did not quite know what to do with. The wagon train to California had seemed like a new beginning, a chance to help her brother's family establish themselves in a new land. But if she was honest with herself, she had never felt truly wanted, truly necessary. She had been included out of obligation, not desire. "I do not know what I want," she admitted. "That is all right. You do not have to decide tonight." Warren settled back down by the fire. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we will see about getting you stronger, and then we will figure out the next step." Delilah finished eating and lay back down on the bedroll, pulling the blanket up to her chin. The night air was growing cold, but the fire provided enough warmth to keep the worst of the chill at bay. Above her, Stars began to appear in the darkening sky, more stars than she had ever seen back in Missouri. Out here on the plains, away from any town or settlement, the sky seemed endless. She watched Warren as he sat by the fire, checking his rifle, organizing his supplies. He moved with quiet efficiency, every action deliberate and practiced. There was something peaceful about watching him work, something that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in a long time. "Warren," she said into the darkness. "Yes. Why were you following the wagon train?" "I was not following it exactly. I am heading west myself, been working ranches in Kansas, and figured I would try my luck further into the territories. The wagon train was just moving in the same direction I was. Where are you going?" "Wherever the work is." "That is the life of a cowboy, Miss Carson. You go where you are needed, do the job, then move on to the next place." He glanced over at her. "It is not much of a life, but it is mine." "It sounds lonely." "It can be," he agreed. "But there is freedom in it too, no one to answer to but yourself. No one to disappoint but yourself." Delilah thought about that. Freedom. She had never really had it. First she had lived under her father's roof, following his rules, then under her brother's roof, following his rules. Even on the wagon train, she had been subject to the wagon master's decisions, the group's needs. She had never made a choice that was purely her own, never walked a path she chose for herself. "What is Leadville like?" she asked. "Never been there myself, but I have heard things." "It is rough, like most mining towns. Lots of men looking to strike it rich, lots of businesses springing up to separate those men from their money. But where there are miners, there is need for services. Laundries, boarding houses, restaurants. A woman with a strong work ethic could do well there." "I can cook," Delilah said, "and sew and clean. I helped run my father's household after my mother died. Then you will have options." Warren stood and added more wood to the fire. "Get some sleep, Miss Carson. We will talk more in the morning." She closed her eyes, but sleep was slow to come. Her mind kept turning over everything that had happened, everything that had changed in the span of a few hours. This morning, she had been part of a wagon train, headed to California with her brother's family. Tonight she was alone in the wilderness with a stranger who had shown her more kindness than her own blood had. What did that say about her life? What did that say about the choices she had made? As she drifted off to sleep, she thought she heard Warren's voice, soft and low, singing something under his breath. It was an old trail song, one the cowboys sang to calm the cattle at night. The melody was mournful but beautiful, and it carried her down into dreams. She woke several times during the night, each time finding Warren sitting by the fire, keeping watch. He never seemed to sleep, just sat there alert and aware, rifle across his lap, eyes scanning the darkness beyond their small circle of firelight. Knowing he was there, keeping guard, allowed her to sleep more deeply than she had in weeks. When dawn broke, pale and cold, Delilah woke to find Warren crouched by the fire making coffee. The smell alone was enough to rouse her fully, and she sat up, surprised to find that her body felt stronger than it had in days. "Morning," Warren said, handing her a cup of the steaming brew. "How are you feeling?" She took a sip of the coffee. It was strong and bitter, but it chased away the last cobwebs of sleep. "Better, much better." "Good. Think you can ride today?" "I think so." "We will take it slow, stop when you need to stop. No point in pushing too hard and ending up back where you started." He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down across from her. "I have been thinking about our options." "What do you mean?" "Well, I can take you to Leadville and leave you there to make your own way. That would be the simplest thing. Or—" he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Or you could travel with me for a while. I was planning to head up into the high country once the snow melts a bit more, see about finding work on one of the ranches up there." They are always looking for hands in the summer, and some of them hire cooks too. It would give you time to build up your strength, save some money, decide what you want to do next. Delilah studied his face, trying to read his intentions. Why would you do that? You have already done more than enough. Warren met her eyes steadily. Because I have got a feeling about you, Miss Carson. You have been knocked down, but you are not broken. You just need someone to walk beside you for a while until you find your feet again. I can be that person, if you will let me. It was a strange offer, one that would have seemed impossible just yesterday. Traveling alone with a man she had only just met, with no chaperone, no family to vouch for her safety. It went against everything she had been taught about propriety and reputation. But sitting there in the morning light, looking at Warren's honest face, she found that she trusted him in a way she had not trusted anyone in a long time. I would like that, she said quietly. If you are sure it is not too much trouble. No trouble at all. Like I said, I was heading that way anyway. He stood and started breaking down the camp with practiced efficiency. We will take it easy today, see how far we can get before you need to rest. There is a trading post about halfway to Leadville where we can stock up on supplies. After that, it is another day and a half to town. They packed up the small camp, Warren doing most of the heavy work while Delilah helped with what she could. Her legs were still shaky, but the food and rest had made a significant difference. When it came time to mount the horse, Warren lifted her into the saddle first, then swung up behind her. You just focus on staying upright, he said, his arm coming around her waist to steady her. I will handle the rest. They rode west, the morning sun at their backs, moving at an easy walk that ate up the miles without exhausting horse or riders. The Colorado landscape spread out around them in rolling plains that gradually gave way to foothills. In the distance, Delilah could see mountains rising up, their peaks still white with snow despite the spring warmth. Warren talked as they rode, pointing out landmarks and sharing what he knew about the country. He showed her how to read the land, how to find water by watching where the birds flew, how to tell time by the position of the sun. He talked about his years working cattle drives, about the ranches he had worked, about the people he had met along the way. Delilah found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the horse's gait, leaning back slightly against Warren's solid chest. There was something comforting about the steady rise and fall of his breathing, the warmth of his body behind hers. She had not realized how cold and alone she had felt until she experienced the opposite. "What about you?" Warren asked after a while. "Tell me about your life before the wagon train." She told him about growing up on the farm in Missouri, about her parents and their deaths, about the way Daniel had changed after he married Margaret. She talked about feeling like she was always in the way, always one too many at the table. About the relief she had felt when Daniel announced they were joining the wagon train, thinking it would be a fresh start for all of them. "Sounds like you have been trying to make yourself smaller for a long time," Warren observed. "Trying to take up less space so people would not mind having you around." Delilah was startled by how accurate that was. "I suppose I have." "Well, you do not have to do that with me. Out here, there is plenty of space for everyone." They stopped for lunch beside a small stream, letting the horse drink and graze while they ate some of the dried beef Warren had in his saddlebags. Delilah's appetite had returned with a vengeance, and she found herself eating more than she had in weeks. "You have got color back in your cheeks," Warren noted with approval. "Keep eating like that and you will be back to full strength in no time." "I cannot remember the last time I was not hungry," she admitted. "On the wagon train, food was rationed so carefully. I always gave most of mine to the children. That is noble, but you cannot take care of anyone else if you do not take care of yourself first." He handed her another piece of beef. Eat. We have got plenty." As the afternoon wore on, Delilah felt her strength beginning to flag. True to his word, Warren stopped as soon as he noticed her leaning more heavily against him, finding a shaded spot to rest. He helped her down from the horse and spread out a blanket for her to sit on. "We have made good progress," he said, settling down beside her. "At this rate, we will reach the trading post by tomorrow afternoon." "I am sorry for slowing you down," Delilah said, shame coloring her voice. Warren turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Miss Carson, I need you to understand something. You are not slowing me down. I chose to adjust my pace to match yours. There is a difference. One makes you a burden and the other makes you a companion. You are my companion on this journey, not my burden. Got it?" Tears stung her eyes at his words. "Got it," she whispered. "Good." His expression softened. "Now rest for a bit. We will ride another couple hours before we make camp for the night." They continued west as the sun began its descent toward the mountains, the shadows growing longer across the plains. Warren maintained his steady pace, never pushing, never showing any sign of impatience with their slow progress. He pointed out a herd of pronghorn antelope in the distance, showed her how to identify different types of grasses, told her stories about some of the more memorable characters he had worked with over the years. Delilah found herself laughing at his tales, feeling lighter than she had in months. There was something about Warren that made her feel safe enough to let her guard down, to just be herself without worrying about being too much or not enough. They made camp that night in a small hollow protected from the wind, with good grass for the horse and a view of the surrounding country. Warren had her sit and rest while he set up camp, refusing her offers to help with a gentle but firm shake of his head. "You are still recovering," he said. "Let me do the work tonight. There will be plenty of time for you to pull your weight once you are stronger." After they had eaten and the fire was burning steadily, Delilah asked the question that had been on her mind all day. "Warren, are you not worried about what people will think? You traveling alone with an unmarried woman?" He looked up from the coffee he was pouring. "You mean about your reputation?" "Yes. When we get to Leadville, people will talk. People always talk." He handed her a cup of coffee. "But if it bothers you, we can tell people you are my sister or my cousin, whatever makes you more comfortable. Would that not be lying?" "It would be protecting your reputation in a world that judges women more harshly than men. I do not see anything wrong with that." He sat down across from her, his eyes serious in the firelight. "But here is the truth, Miss Carson. I do not care much what people think about me. I care about doing what is right. And leaving you to die on that trail would not have been right. Taking you somewhere safe is right. If people want to make something ugly out of that, that is their problem, not mine." Delilah wrapped her hands around the warm cup, feeling something shift inside her chest. This man, this stranger who owed her nothing, was willing to risk his own reputation to protect hers. It was more than her own brother had been willing to do. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Warren smiled, and it transformed his whole face, making him look younger and less weathered. "You are welcome." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle and the distant calls of night birds. The stars came out in their thousands, spreading across the sky like diamonds scattered on black velvet. "It is beautiful out here," Delilah said softly. "Frightening sometimes, but beautiful. That is the frontier for you, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. That is why you need to know what you are doing, or you need to be with someone who does. And you know what you are doing, well enough to keep us both alive." He poked at the fire with a stick. "I have been making my way in this country since I was 16. I have seen a lot of it from Texas to Montana. I have worked ranches and driven cattle and even spent a winter trapping in the mountains. It is a hard life, but it is honest, And out here, a person's word means something. A handshake is as good as a contract. Is that what you miss? The honesty? Warren was quiet for a moment, considering. I think what I appreciate is that out here you are judged by what you do, not who your family is or how much money you have. If you work hard and keep your word, people respect you. If you do not, they do not. It is simple. Fair. Except for women, Delilah said quietly. We are still judged differently. That is true, Warren acknowledged, and it is not fair. But there are places on the frontier where a strong woman can make her own way. Leadville might be one of them. It is new enough that people are still figuring out the rules, still deciding what kind of town it is going to be. You could help shape that. The idea appealed to Delilah more than she wanted to admit. The chance to help build something new, to be part of creating a community rather than just fitting into an existing one. It was ambitious, maybe even foolish, but sitting there under the endless stars, it felt possible. Tell me more about Leadville, she said. Warren settled back against his saddle, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller. Well, it started out as a placer mining camp back in 1860 or so, folks looking for gold. They found some, but not enough to make anyone rich. Most of the miners moved on. But then a few years ago, someone realized that the heavy black sand that was clogging up the sluices was actually silver carbonate. Silver, Miss Carson, in quantities that made the gold look like pocket change. And that brought people back, brought people flooding in. Last I heard, the population was pushing 10,000 and growing every day. There are mines going in everywhere, smelters being built, businesses opening up. They even incorporated the town properly last year. It is wild and rough, but there is money flowing and opportunity for those willing to work for it. What kind of work could I do? Like I said before, you have got skills that are valuable. Cooking, cleaning, sewing. There are boarding houses full of miners who need their clothes washed and mended. Restaurants that need cooks. Rich mine owners whose wives need help with housework. And if you are clever and save your money, you could eventually start your own business. A boarding house of your own, maybe, or a restaurant. Delilah tried to imagine it, tried to picture herself as an independent businesswoman. It seemed impossible, like a dream too big for someone like her to grasp. But Warren spoke about it as if it were not only possible but probable, and his confidence was infectious. I would need money to start a business, she pointed out. You would need some, yes, but not as much as you might think if you are smart about it. Work for a year or two, save every penny you can, learn how the successful businesses operate. Then when you are ready, you make your move. He smiled at her across the fire. I have seen people build empires from nothing out here, Miss Carson. If they can do it, so can you. They talked late into the night, Warren painting pictures of possibility with his words while Delilah listened, and felt hope kindle in her chest for the first time in longer than she could remember. When she finally lay down to sleep, her mind was full of dreams of a future she was just beginning to imagine. The next day dawned clear and bright, and Delilah woke feeling stronger than she had since before the fever. Warren noticed immediately, commenting on how much better she looked as he helped her prepare for the day's ride. They made good progress, covering more ground than they had the previous day. The landscape changed as they moved west, the flat plains giving way to rolling hills and more frequent stands of trees. They crossed several small streams, passing occasional signs of other travelers but seeing no one. Late in the afternoon, they crested a hill and Warren pointed to a cluster of buildings in the valley below. That is the trading post I mentioned. We can stock up on supplies there and get a hot meal. As they rode down toward the post, Delilah felt a flutter of nervousness. This would be the first time she had been around other people since Warren rescued her. How would they react to seeing a woman traveling alone with a man? Would they make assumptions? Would they judge her? Warren must have sensed her tension because he said quietly, "Remember, you do not owe anyone an explanation. We will get what we need and be on our way." The trading post was a rough collection of log buildings surrounding a central yard. A handful of horses were tied to hitching posts, and smoke rose from the chimney of the main building. As they rode into the yard, several men looked up from their various activities, their eyes tracking them with open curiosity. Warren dismounted first, then helped Delilah down. His hand lingered on her elbow, a subtle but clear signal of protection. They walked together into the main building, which served as both trading post and tavern. The interior was dim and smoky, with rough wooden tables scattered around and a long counter at the back where goods were displayed. A large man with a barrel chest and graying beard stood behind the counter, watching them approach with sharp eyes. "Help you folks?" he asked. "Need to stock up on supplies," Warren said easily. "Flour, beans, coffee, salt, and whatever hot food you have got cooking." The man's gaze shifted to Delilah, taking in her dusty dress and travel-worn appearance. "Your wife, my companion," Warren said, his tone making it clear the topic was not open for discussion. "About those supplies," the man grunted but started gathering the requested items. A woman emerged from a back room, wiping her hands on her apron. She was middle-aged with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a bun. "You look like you could use a wash and a proper meal, dear," she said to Delilah. "I've got stew cooking in the back, and there is a room where you can freshen up if you like." The kindness in her voice made Delilah want to cry. "That would be wonderful, thank you." The woman led her to a small back room with a basin of water and clean towels. "Take your time. I will have food ready when you are done." Delilah washed her face and hands, trying to make herself more presentable. When she looked in the small mirror on the wall, she barely recognized herself. The fever and the journey had left her gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes and a pallor to her skin that spoke of illness. But there was also something different in her eyes, something that had not been there before. A spark of determination, perhaps, or hope. When she returned to the main room, Warren was sitting at one of the tables, 2 bowls of steaming stew already waiting. She joined him, and they ate in silence, both too hungry to bother with conversation. The stew was delicious, thick with meat and vegetables and seasoned perfectly. Delilah ate every drop and seriously considered asking for seconds until Warren did it for her, bringing back 2 more bowls without being asked. "Eat up," he said. "You need to put some weight back on." After they had finished eating and Warren had paid for their supplies, they headed back outside. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red. "We could push on for a few more hours," Warren said, "or we could stay here for the night. There is a barn where travelers can sleep, and it would give you a chance to rest in a real building instead of on the ground." "I do not want to slow us down more than I already have," Delilah said. Warren turned to face her fully. "Miss Carson, we have had this conversation. You are not slowing me down. I am asking what you want to do, what would make you most comfortable." It was such a simple question, but it caught her off guard. When was the last time anyone had asked her what she wanted? "I think I would like to stay," she admitted, "just for tonight." "Then we stay." He smiled at her, that transforming smile that made her heart do strange things in her chest. They arranged for space in the barn, spreading their bedrolls in the hay loft where it was warm and dry. Other travelers were scattered around the barn, but the loft afforded them some privacy. Warren insisted Delilah take the spot against the wall, farthest from the ladder, where she would be most protected. As night fell and the other travelers settled in for sleep, Delilah lay in her bedroll staring up at the rough wooden beams of the barn roof. She was acutely aware of Warren lying just a few feet away, aware of the sound of his breathing and the warmth of his presence. "Warren," she whispered. "Yes. Do you ever get scared, out here on your own, I mean?" There was a pause before he answered. "Sometimes. Fear is not a bad thing, though. It keeps you sharp, keeps you from getting careless. The trick is not letting it control you. How do you do that? You face it. You acknowledge that, yes, this is scary, and then you do what needs to be done anyway. Courage is not the absence of fear, Miss Carson. It is acting despite the fear." Delilah thought about that. "I have been scared for so long. Scared of being a burden, scared of being left behind, scared of what would happen to me. I am tired of being scared." Then decide to stop. Decide that you are going to face whatever comes and deal with it. You are stronger than you think you are. How do you know? Because you are still here. You could have given up when that fever hit you. You could have given up when the wagon train left you behind. But you did not. You kept going. That takes strength. His words settled over her like a warm blanket. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was stronger than she thought. Maybe everything that had happened was not the end of her story but the beginning of a new chapter. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For seeing something in me that I could not see in myself." There was a rustle of movement, and then Warren's hand found hers in the darkness, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Get some sleep, Delilah. Tomorrow we ride into Leadville and your new life begins." It was the first time he had used her first name instead of calling her Miss Carson, and the intimacy of it made her breath catch. She fell asleep with her hand still wrapped in his, feeling safer and more hopeful than she had in years. The next morning they set out early, both eager to reach Leadville. The landscape changed dramatically as they climbed higher into the mountains, the air growing thinner and colder. Delilah had never seen mountains like these before, towering peaks that seemed to scrape the sky, their slopes covered in pine forests so dense they looked black from a distance. Warren kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and wildlife, telling her what to expect in Leadville. His knowledge seemed endless, and Delilah found herself hanging on his every word, not just for the information but for the sound of his voice, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle way he corrected her when she asked questions. She was falling for him. The realization hit her somewhere around midday, as they stopped to water the horse at a mountain stream. She was falling in love with Warren Wheeler, this cowboy who had stopped to help a stranger, who had slowed his pace to walk beside her when the rest of the world had left her behind. It was foolish, she told herself. She had known him for only a few days. Love did not happen that fast, did not grow from such rocky soil. But her heart did not seem to care about logic or propriety. It had made its choice, and no amount of reasoning was going to change it. The question was, did Warren feel anything for her beyond simple kindness? He had been nothing but a gentleman, never overstepping or making her feel uncomfortable. His touches were always respectful, his words always appropriate. But sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression she could not quite read, something warm and wondering that made her pulse quicken. They reached Leadville in the late afternoon, coming over a rise to see the town spread out in the valley below. It was bigger than Delilah had expected, a sprawling collection of buildings that seemed to be constantly expanding. Even from a distance, she could hear the sounds of industry, the ring of hammers and the rumble of ore carts. "What do you think?" Warren asked, drawing the horse to a stop so they could take it all in. "It is big," Delilah said, feeling suddenly overwhelmed, "and loud." "That it is. But remember, where there is noise and activity, there is opportunity." He urged the horse forward, beginning their descent into town. Let us find you a place to stay first, then we can figure out the rest." They rode down the main street, drawing curious looks from passers-by. Leadville was a study in contrasts, with elegant false front buildings standing next to rough log cabins and canvas tents. Well-dressed businessmen shared the wooden sidewalks with mud-splattered miners. Delilah saw at least 3 different churches, 2 banks, and more saloons than she could count. Warren stopped at a respectable-looking boarding house with a painted sign that read, "Mrs. Patterson's Rooms for Rent." He helped Delilah down from the horse and tied the reins to the hitching post. "Let me do the talking," he said quietly before they went inside. The interior of the boarding house was clean and well-maintained, with lace curtains at the windows and polished wood floors. A middle-aged woman with steel-gray hair and a no-nonsense expression sat behind a small desk, looking them over with assessing eyes. "Help you?" she asked. "My cousin here needs a room," Warren said, placing a protective hand on Delilah's shoulder. "She just arrived in town and is looking for work. Can you accommodate her?" Mrs. Patterson's sharp eyes moved from Warren to Delilah and back again. "Cousin, is it?" "Yes, madam. I am just passing through, but I wanted to make sure she was settled somewhere safe before I move on." The woman seemed to come to some decision. "I've got a room on the 2nd floor. $3 a week includes breakfast and dinner. No men in the rooms, no drinking, no loud noise after 10 o'clock. Church on Sundays is expected but not required. Those are my rules. Can you abide by them?" "Yes, madam," Delilah said quickly. "I can pay for 2 weeks in advance." It was most of the money she had managed to save before joining the wagon train, but having a secure place to stay was worth it. "Then we have got a deal." Mrs. Patterson stood and pulled a key from a hook on the wall behind her. "Follow me." She led them upstairs to a small but clean room with a single bed, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a window that looked out onto the street. It was simple, but after weeks of sleeping on the ground or in wagons, it looked like luxury to Delilah. "Breakfast is at 7, dinner at 6, Mrs. Patterson said. "If you need anything, you can find me downstairs. I can also help you find work if you are looking." "I would appreciate that," Delilah said. Mrs. Patterson nodded and left, closing the door behind her. Delilah stood in the center of the small room, feeling suddenly lost. This was it. This was where her new life would begin. Warren set her small bundle of possessions on the bed. "It is a good room," he said. "Mrs. Patterson seems strict, but that is not a bad thing. It means she runs a respectable house." "What do I do now?" Delilah asked, and she hated how small her voice sounded. Warren turned to face her, his expression gentle. "Now you rest for tonight. Tomorrow you start looking for work, and you remember that you are strong and capable and you can do this. Will you?" She trailed off, not sure how to ask. "Will I what? Will you stay? In Leadville, I mean, at least for a little while." Warren was quiet for a long moment, his gray-green eyes searching her face. "I was planning to head up into the high country in a few days," he said slowly. "But I suppose I could stick around Leadville for a bit, see if there is any work to be had. Make sure you get settled properly." Relief flooded through Delilah so intensely it made her knees weak. "Thank you. But Delilah, you need to understand something." He took a step closer to her, his voice serious. "You cannot depend on me forever. This is your life, your fresh start. I can help you for a little while, but eventually you need to stand on your own 2 feet. You need to build a life that is yours, not one that is dependent on anyone else. Do you understand?" She nodded, even though the thought of him leaving made her chest ache. "I understand." "Good." He smiled then, breaking the tension. "Now, I am going to find a place to stable my horse and get myself a room somewhere. I will come by tomorrow morning and we can have breakfast together, plan out how you are going to take Leadville by storm. Sound good?" Sounds good. Warren tipped his hat to her and left, his boots echoing on the wooden stairs as he descended. Delilah stood at the window and watched him ride away down the street, her hand pressed against the glass as if she could reach through it and pull him back. She was on her own now, truly on her own for the first time in her life. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. That night, she lay in the narrow bed and listened to the sounds of Leadville settling in for the night. Somewhere a piano was playing, tinny and slightly out of tune. Voices drifted up from the street, loud with drink and laughter. A dog barked in the distance. It was all so different from the quiet farm nights she had grown up with, different even from the wagon train with its organized rhythms and routines. This was chaos. This was possibility. This was freedom. True to his word, Warren appeared at Mrs. Patterson's boarding house the next morning just as breakfast was being served. The other boarders, all women, eyed him with curiosity and varying degrees of approval as he waited in the parlor for Delilah. She came down wearing the same dress as yesterday, her only decent one, freshly brushed and with her hair pulled back neatly. Warren stood when he saw her, his face lighting up in a way that made her heart skip. "Morning," he said. "You look rested." "I slept well, real bed and everything." She smiled at him, suddenly feeling shy. In the daylight, after a night of reflection, her feelings for him seemed even more intense and impossible. They ate breakfast together at a small restaurant down the street, then Warren walked with her to several businesses that might be hiring. The first was a laundry, where the owner took one look at Delilah's hands and asked if she could start that afternoon. The second was a restaurant that needed someone to help with prep work in the mornings. By noon, Delilah had 2 job offers and the promise of enough work to keep her busy and earning money. "See," Warren said as they walked back toward the boarding house. "I told you there would be opportunities." "I could not have done this without you," Delilah said. "Sure you could have. I just gave you a push in the right direction." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Delilah, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to pound. "What is it?" "I found work too. There is a ranch about 20 miles north of here, up in the high country. They need hands for the summer and the pay is good. I am heading up there the day after tomorrow." Delilah felt like the ground had dropped out from under her. She knew this was coming, knew he could not stay forever, but she had hoped for more time. "Oh, I will come back," he said quickly. "When the work is done in the fall, I will come back to Leadville. And in the meantime, you will be building your life here, saving your money, figuring out what you want to do. When I come back, you will be so busy and successful you might not even have time for me." She wanted to tell him that she would always have time for him, that he had become essential to her in a way she did not fully understand. But instead, she just nodded. "When will you leave?" "Day after tomorrow. But I will spend tomorrow with you if you want. Show you around town, make sure you know where everything is." "I would like that." They spent the rest of the day exploring Leadville together, Warren pointing out the important landmarks, introducing her to shopkeepers and business owners who might be useful connections. He bought her lunch and made her laugh with stories about some of the more colorful characters in town. By the time evening came, Delilah felt like she had a better grasp on the rhythm of the place, the way it worked and breathed. As they walked back to the boarding house in the fading light, Warren said, "You are going to do just fine here, Delilah. I know it." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I have seen you face down impossible things and keep going. Because you have got more strength in you than you realize. Because you are not content to just survive anymore. You want to live, really live, and that will carry you through whatever comes." They stopped in front of the boarding house, neither of them quite ready to say goodbye. The street was busy with people heading home from work or out for the evening, but in that moment, It felt like they were the only two people in the world. "Warren," Delilah said softly, "I want you to know that you saved my life, not just from dying on that trail, but from giving up on myself. You saw something in me worth saving, and that changed everything." Warren reached out and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering for just a moment against her cheek. "You saved yourself, Delilah. I just slowed down and walked beside you while you did it." The next day, Warren arrived early and they spent every possible moment together. He took her to meet the foreman at the laundry, made sure she knew exactly when and where to show up for her jobs. They walked through the streets of Leadville, and he showed her the best places to buy supplies, which merchants to trust and which to avoid. He taught her how to haggle, how to stand her ground, how to navigate a rough mining town as a single woman. But mostly, they just talked. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Delilah learned that Warren had always wanted to have his own ranch someday, a place where he could put down roots and build something lasting. Warren learned that Delilah had always loved to read, though books had been scarce on the farm, and that she dreamed of maybe opening a library someday in addition to whatever business she started. As the day wore on, there was a bittersweet quality to their time together, both of them aware that tomorrow Warren would leave and their paths would diverge, at least for a while. That evening, they walked to the edge of town where the buildings gave way to wilderness, and they could see the mountains rising up in the fading light. They stood side by side, not quite touching but close enough that Delilah could feel the warmth radiating from Warren's body. "I am going to miss you," Delilah said, the words barely a whisper. "I am going to miss you too." Warren turned to look at her, his eyes intense in the twilight. "Delilah, I need to tell you something before I go." Her heart began to race. "What?" "When I first saw you, kneeling in the dirt and left behind by people who should have protected you, I stopped because of a promise I made to Samuel. But that is not why I have stayed. That is not why leaving tomorrow feels like tearing off a piece of myself. Warren, let me finish." He took both her hands in his, holding them gently. "Somewhere along the way, you stopped being a stranger I helped and became someone important to me. Someone I think about when I wake up and before I fall asleep. Someone whose smile makes my whole day better. I know it has only been a few days. I know it is too soon to feel this way, but I cannot deny it anymore." Delilah felt tears spring to her eyes. "You feel it too." "I am falling in love with you, Delilah Carson. Maybe I have been since the moment I saw you refuse to give up even when everything was stacked against you." He squeezed her hands gently. "But you need time. You need to build your own life, figure out who you are when you are not under someone else's shadow. You need to stand on your own 2 feet before you can choose to stand beside someone else. So I am going to go work that ranch job, and you are going to stay here and become the amazing woman I know you can be. And when I come back in the fall, if you still want me, if you have built a life you are proud of and you still think there might be room in it for a cowboy, then we will see where this goes." Delilah was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face. "What if you do not come back? What if you change your mind or find someone else or something happens to you? I will come back. I promise you, Delilah, I will come back. You have got my word on that, and my word is everything I have to give." She believed him. Against all logic, against all the times she had been disappointed and let down before, she believed Warren Wheeler would keep his promise. "I will wait for you," she said. "I will build a life I am proud of, and when you come back, I will show you everything I have accomplished. And then, yes, we will see where this goes." Warren smiled and pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Delilah wrapped her arms around his waist and buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of leather and horse and the open range. They stood like that for a long time, two people who had found each other against impossible odds, holding on tight before they had to let go. When Warren finally pulled back, he cupped her face in his hands and looked at her with so much tenderness it made her ache. "You are going to do amazing things, Delilah, I know it. Come back to me," she whispered. "I will. I promise." He kissed her forehead, gentle and sweet, then stepped away. They walked back to the boarding house in silence, hands clasped tightly together, trying to make the moment last just a little bit longer. At the door, they said their final goodbyes. Warren promised to write if he could, though mail delivery to the remote ranch would be unreliable at best. Delilah promised to save every penny and work hard. They made promises they both intended to keep, and then Warren tipped his hat to her one last time and walked away into the night. Delilah stood at her window and watched until she could not see him anymore, then cried until she had no tears left. Tomorrow would be hard. Tomorrow she would have to stand on her own for the first time in her life. But she would do it. She would do it because Warren believed she could, and because she was finally starting to believe it herself. The next few weeks were a blur of hard work and exhaustion. Delilah worked at the laundry in the afternoons, standing over steaming tubs of water and scrubbing clothes until her hands were raw. In the mornings, she worked at the restaurant, chopping vegetables and washing dishes, and slowly learning how to cook for large groups. Every penny she earned went into a small tin box she kept hidden under her bed. Mrs. Patterson took a liking to her, often sitting with her in the evenings and sharing advice about navigating life in a mining town. The other boarders, all working women like herself, became friends and allies. They shared tips about where to find the best deals, which men to avoid, how to stretch a dollar until it screamed. Delilah also started visiting the small library that had recently opened, spending her rare free hours reading everything she could get her hands on. She read about business management, about cooking and baking, about the history of Colorado and the mining industry. She soaked up knowledge like a sponge, determined to educate herself in ways she had never had the opportunity to before. As spring turned to summer, Delilah felt herself changing. Her body grew stronger from the physical work, the pallor of illness fading into healthy color. But more than that, her spirit grew stronger. She learned to speak up for herself, to negotiate for fair wages, to stand her ground when men tried to take advantage of her. She learned that she was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. She also learned that she missed Warren with an intensity that sometimes took her breath away. She thought of him constantly, wondered what he was doing up in the high country, hoped he was safe and well. On particularly hard days, she would take out the memory of their last evening together and replay it in her mind, drawing strength from his belief in her. Summer blazed hot and bright over Leadville. The town continued to grow, new buildings going up seemingly overnight, new people arriving every day. Delilah's reputation as a hard worker spread, and she found herself with more job offers than she could accept. She began to specialize in baking, discovering that she had a talent for bread and pastries that people were willing to pay premium prices for. By late July, she had saved enough money to start seriously thinking about her own business. She spent her evenings drawing up plans, calculating costs, figuring out what would be most profitable. A bakery, she decided. Leadville had restaurants and hotels, but no dedicated bakery. Miners would pay good money for fresh bread and sweet treats. The wives of mine owners would pay even more for elaborate cakes and pastries. It was ambitious, probably foolish, but the idea took root in her mind and would not let go. She started asking questions, learning about suppliers and equipment, about the cost of renting space and hiring help. Mrs. Patterson connected her with a banker who was willing to discuss business loans with women, a rarity in those days. August came, and with it the first hints that summer would not last forever. The nights grew cooler, the aspen trees starting to show touches of gold. Delilah found herself watching the road north out of town, hoping to see a familiar figure on a dappled gray horse. She had not heard from Warren. She told herself this was expected, that mail delivery to remote ranches was unreliable, that he was probably just busy with work. But doubt crept in during the long nights. What if he had changed his mind? What if he had met someone else? What if he had never felt as strongly as she did and the whole thing had been a mistake? But then she would remember the way he had looked at her, the promises he had made, and she would push the doubt away. Warren Wheeler was a man of his word. He would come back. She just had to be patient. In early September, Delilah took the biggest risk of her life. She used all the money she had saved plus a small loan from the bank to lease a storefront on Main Street and purchase the equipment she needed for her bakery. The space was small but well located, with big windows that let in plenty of light and a good stove that could handle the baking she had planned. She spent 2 weeks getting everything ready, cleaning and painting and organizing. Mrs. Patterson helped her come up with a name, Delilah's Fine Baked Goods. It was simple and direct, and Delilah loved it. The bakery opened on a crisp morning in late September. Delilah had been up since before dawn, baking bread and rolls and cinnamon buns. The smell wafted out into the street, drawing customers almost immediately. By noon, she had sold out of everything and had orders for the next day. Over the following weeks, the bakery became a success beyond her wildest dreams. She hired 2 young women to help her, teaching them to bake while handling the business side herself. She expanded her offerings, started taking special orders, built relationships with the hotels and restaurants who needed reliable suppliers. She had done it. She had built a life she was proud of, a business that was hers, a reputation based on her own merits. She stood on her own 2 feet, just as Warren had challenged her to do. But still, he did not come. October arrived, painting the mountains in brilliant golds and reds. The nights grew cold enough for frost, and snow dusted the highest peaks. Ranch hands would be finishing up their summer work soon, heading down from the high country before winter set in. Delilah told herself that any day now, Warren would appear. Any day now, she would look up from her work and see him standing in the doorway of her bakery, that slow smile spreading across his face. Any day now. But the days passed, and he did not come. She started to prepare herself for the possibility that he might not come at all. Maybe something had happened to him. Maybe he had decided that a cowboy and a bakery owner were too different, their lives too incompatible. Maybe the feelings that had seemed so real and intense in the spring had faded during the long summer apart. The thought made her heart ache, but she refused to let it break her. She had built this life for herself, and it was a good life. She had friends, a successful business, a future full of possibilities. If Warren did not come back, it would hurt, but it would not destroy her. She was strong enough to survive it. It was the 3rd week of October when Delilah heard the commotion outside her bakery. Raised voices, the sound of a horse, someone calling her name. She looked up from the dough she was kneading to see one of her assistants, Mary, rushing in from the front. "Miss Carson, there is a man here asking for you. Says his name is Warren Wheeler." Delilah's heart stopped. Then it started again, racing so fast she felt dizzy. She looked down at her flour-covered hands, her work apron, the bits of dough stuck to her sleeves. This was not how she had imagined their reunion. She had planned to be clean and presentable, to show him the bakery when it was at its best, not in the middle of the afternoon rush covered in flour. But none of that mattered. He had come back. He had kept his promise. She pulled off her apron and hurried to the front of the shop, barely aware of Mary's knowing smile. And there he was, standing just inside the door, looking travel-worn and dusty, and more wonderful than anyone had a right to look. Warren's eyes found hers across the small shop, and his whole face lit up. Delilah! She meant to walk calmly toward him, meant to be composed and dignified. Instead, she ran. She ran straight into his arms, and he caught her and lifted her off the ground, spinning her around while she laughed and cried at the same time. "You came back," she said against his chest. "You came back. I promised you I would." He set her down but did not let her go, his arms wrapped tight around her. "Did you think I would not? I hoped, I believed, but as time went on. I am sorry I am later than I planned. The ranch owner wanted us to stay through the first snow to get the cattle down from the high pastures. I came as soon as I could." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his eyes roaming over her features as if memorizing them. "You look amazing, healthy and strong and happy." "I am happy. Warren, I did it. I built the life you challenged me to build. I have a bakery now, a real business. I have employees and customers and a reputation. I am standing on my own 2 feet. I know. I heard about it before I even got into town. People were talking about the best bakery in Leadville, run by a woman named Delilah Carson. I was so proud I thought my heart might burst." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears on her cheeks. "You did amazing things, just like I knew you would. I missed you every single day. I missed you too. Thought about you constantly, wondered how you were doing, hoped you were happy." His expression grew serious. "Delilah, I meant what I said before I left. I am in love with you. These months apart did not change that. If anything, they made it stronger. But I need to know, how do you feel? Did you build a life that has room in it for me?" Delilah felt joy bubble up inside her, bright and effervescent and impossible to contain. "Warren Wheeler, I have been in love with you since the day you stopped your horse and refused to leave me behind. I built this life because you believed I could, and every success I have had, I wanted to share with you. There is not just room for you in my life. You are the missing piece that makes it complete." Warren smiled, that slow, transforming smile she had fallen in love with, and then he kissed her. It was gentle and sweet and full of all the longing and hope that had built up over the long months apart. Delilah kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, all her love and gratitude and joy. Around them, the bakery erupted in cheers and applause. Delilah had forgotten they had an audience, forgotten everything except Warren and the feeling of finally being whole. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning like fools, Mary was wiping tears from her eyes. "About time," she said. "We have been hearing about this cowboy for months." Warren laughed and kept his arm around Delilah's waist, holding her close. "Can you take a break?" he asked. "I would love to see this bakery of yours properly, hear about everything you have accomplished. Mary, can you handle things for a bit?" "Of course. Take all the time you need, Miss Carson." Delilah led Warren through the bakery, showing him the kitchen, the ovens, the storage areas, explaining how she had organized everything for maximum efficiency. She introduced him to her other assistant, told him about her big clients and her plans for expansion. Warren listened to everything with evident pride, asking questions and offering encouragement. "This is incredible, Delilah. You built all this in just a few months." "Well, I had good motivation. Someone told me I was capable of amazing things, and I wanted to prove him right." They ended up in the small office she had set up in the back, and Warren pulled her down to sit beside him on the small bench she kept there. "Tell me everything. I want to know every detail." So she did. She told him about those first hard weeks when she worked multiple jobs and saved every penny. About the moment she decided to take the risk and open the bakery. About the terror and exhilaration of opening day. About the slow building of success, one customer at a time, one loaf of bread at a time. She told him about the friends she had made, the skills she had learned, the confidence she had found. Warren listened to it all, his eyes never leaving her face, his hand holding hers. When she finished, he said, "I am so proud of you I can hardly stand it. You are exactly who I knew you could be. Tell me about your summer. What was ranch work like?" Warren described his time in the high country, herding cattle through mountain meadows, sleeping under the stars, working alongside other cowboys who became friends. He talked about the beauty of the mountains, the challenges of the work, the satisfaction of a job well done. But through it all, he said, he thought of her. He wondered what she was doing, how her plans were progressing, whether she thought of him too. Every single day, Delilah assured him. Some days, thinking about you coming back was the only thing that kept me going. Well, I am back now, and I am not going anywhere unless you tell me to go. I would never tell you to go. Good, because I have got some things I need to say. Warren shifted to face her more fully. Delilah, you have built an amazing life here. You have got a successful business, friends, a home. I do not want to disrupt that or ask you to give up anything you have worked so hard for. But I want to be part of your life, if you will have me. I have got money saved from the summer work, enough to rent a small place in town. I can find work, maybe at one of the ranches nearby, something that lets me be here with you. And someday, if you want, maybe we could talk about making this official. About you becoming my wife and me becoming your husband. But only if that is what you want. I will not pressure you or rush you. I just need you to know that I am here, and I am committed to building a life with you. Delilah felt like her heart might burst from happiness. Warren, I would be honored to be your wife, but you do not have to wait or go slow or any of that. I know what I want. I have known since the day you stopped your horse and refused to leave me behind. I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you. I want all of it. Are you sure? We have only spent a few days together total. Maybe we should court properly, give you time to be certain. I am certain. The heart knows what it knows, and mine has known since the beginning that you are the one for me. She took his hands in hers, looking directly into his eyes. You saw me when I was at my lowest and you did not turn away. You challenged me to be better, to be stronger, and then you believed I could do it. You slowed down and walked beside me when everyone else left me behind. How could I not love you? How could I not want to spend my life with you? Warren pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. I love you, Delilah Carson. I loved you when you were sick and struggling, and I love you now that you are strong and successful. I will love you every day for the rest of my life. And I love you, Warren Wheeler. You saved me, and then you helped me save myself. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. They sat there in the small office, holding each other and making plans for a future that had seemed impossible just months ago. Warren would find work in the area, something that allowed him to be close to town and to Delilah. They would marry as soon as arrangements could be made, maybe before winter set in too hard. He could help with the bakery when needed, but Delilah would remain in charge of her business. It was hers, and he had no interest in taking that away from her. I never wanted a wife who needed me to survive, Warren said. I wanted a partner, someone who chose to be with me because she wanted to, not because she had to. You are that person, Delilah. You proved you could make it on your own, and now you are choosing me anyway. That means everything. The wedding took place on a cold November morning in the small church on the edge of Leadville. Mrs. Patterson stood up with Delilah, while Warren asked the foreman from the ranch where he had worked to be his best man. The ceremony was simple but beautiful, with Delilah wearing a new dress she had made herself, white cotton with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. When the preacher asked if she took Warren to be her husband, Delilah's voice rang out clear and strong. "I do." And when Warren slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, she felt like everything in her life had led to this moment. All the pain and struggle, all the fear and doubt, all of it had been worth it to end up here, marrying the man who had saved her life and then helped her build a new one. The reception was held in Delilah's bakery, with her assistants having prepared a feast of breads and pastries and cakes. The whole town seemed to turn out, curious about the woman who had opened a successful business and the cowboy she was marrying. There was music and dancing and laughter, and through it all, Warren never let go of Delilah's hand. As the sun set and the celebration began to wind down, Warren leaned down to whisper in Delilah's ear, "Ready to start our new life, Mrs. Wheeler, Mrs. Wheeler." She loved the sound of that. "I have been ready since the day you stopped your horse and refused to leave me behind." They had found a small house to rent on the outskirts of town, close enough for Delilah to walk to the bakery but far enough for some privacy. It was modest, just 3 rooms, but it was theirs. Warren carried her over the threshold while she laughed, then set her down gently in the main room. "Welcome home," he said, "home." It was a word that had meant so many different things to her over the years: her father's farm, her brother's wagon, the boarding house, the bakery. But standing there in Warren's arms, she finally understood what home really meant. It was not a place. It was a person. It was this man who had seen her at her worst and loved her anyway, who had challenged her to be her best and celebrated when she succeeded. Warren had indeed found work at a ranch just outside of town, close enough that he could ride home most evenings. The work was good, the pay fair, and it allowed him to use the skills he had spent years developing. But he also helped Delilah at the bakery when she needed it, loading heavy sacks of flour, making deliveries, handling customers when she was busy in the back. They fell into an easy rhythm, their lives intertwining naturally. Delilah would wake early to start the day's baking, and Warren would wake with her, making coffee and keeping her company before he left for the ranch. In the evenings, they would have dinner together, sharing stories about their days, making plans for the future. Winter set in hard that year, with snow piling high in the streets and temperatures dropping well below 0. But Delilah's bakery remained open and busy, providing fresh bread to a town that appreciated hot food in the cold months. Warren proved invaluable during the worst of the winter, clearing paths to the bakery, making sure Delilah got home safely when the weather was particularly bad, keeping the fire going so she never had to work in a cold kitchen. They spent the long winter evenings curled up together by the fire, reading aloud to each other from the books Delilah borrowed from the library. Warren had never learned to read particularly well, his education having been cut short when he started working at a young age. Delilah taught him, patiently working through words and sentences until his skills improved dramatically. In return, Warren taught Delilah about the natural world, about reading weather patterns and animal signs, about survival skills that might seem useless in town, but gave her a new appreciation for the land around them. They learned from each other, grew together, built a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Spring came late that year, the snow reluctant to release its grip on the high country. But when it finally arrived, it brought renewal and new growth. Delilah discovered she was pregnant in early April, and the joy on Warren's face when she told him was something she would treasure forever. "A baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Delilah asked, suddenly nervous. They had not planned this, had not discussed when or if they wanted children. Happy, Warren pulled her into his arms, holding her gently as if she might break. Delilah, I am thrilled, terrified but thrilled. We are going to be parents. They spent the next months preparing for the baby's arrival. Warren built a cradle with his own hands, carefully sanding every surface until it was smooth as silk. Delilah sewed tiny clothes and blankets, making everything with love and care. Mrs. Patterson and the other women in town rallied around them, offering advice and support and hand-me-down baby items. The bakery continued to thrive, with Delilah training her assistants to handle more responsibility as her pregnancy advanced. By the time she was in her final months, Mary was essentially running the day-to-day operations while Delilah focused on the business and financial side of things. The baby came on a hot August night, almost exactly a year after Warren had first arrived in Leadville. It was a long and difficult labor, with Delilah gripping Warren's hand so hard she left bruises. But when the midwife finally placed their son in her arms, every moment of pain was forgotten. "A boy," Warren said, his voice thick with emotion. "We have a son." They named him Samuel, after the cowboy who had saved Warren and taught him about kindness and keeping promises. Samuel Westwheeler, a name that honored the past while looking toward the future. Warren proved to be a natural father, patient and gentle with the baby. He would walk Samuel around the house when he cried, singing old trail songs in his deep voice until the baby settled. He changed diapers without complaint, paced the floor during teething, and looked at his son with such pure love that it made Delilah fall even more deeply in love with her husband. Life settled into a new rhythm with Samuel in it. Delilah balanced motherhood with running the bakery, often bringing Samuel to work with her and letting customers coo over him. Warren continued working at the ranch but made sure he was home every evening, refusing jobs that would take him away overnight. They were happy. It was a simple happiness, built on hard work and mutual support and love that had been tested and proven strong. Delilah would sometimes think back to that day on the trail when she had been left behind, when she had fallen to her knees certain that her life was over. How could she have known that it was actually just beginning? That the end of one journey was the start of another, better one. 2 years after Samuel was born, Delilah gave birth to a daughter they named Grace. She had Warren's gray-green eyes and Delilah's dark hair, and she was the most beautiful thing Delilah had ever seen. Samuel, now a sturdy toddler, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from feeding to diaper changes. The bakery had grown enough that Delilah was able to purchase the building outright, using the profits she had carefully saved and reinvested. She expanded the space, adding more ovens and hiring additional help. The bakery had become a fixture in Leadville, known throughout the region for quality and consistency. Warren had also advanced, becoming foreman at the ranch where he worked. The position came with better pay and more responsibility, and he thrived in the role. But despite his success at the ranch, his heart was always with his family. He would rush home at the end of each day, eager to see Delilah and the children, to hear about their day and share his own. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their small house watching Samuel and Grace play in the yard, Warren said, "Do you ever think about that day on the trail? When I first saw you?" "All the time," Delilah admitted. "I think about how scared I was, how certain I was that my life was over. Instead, it was just beginning. Thanks to you." She took his hand, intertwining their fingers. "You stopped when everyone else kept going. You slowed down and walked beside me when I could not keep pace. You gave me the chance to become who I was meant to be." "No," Warren said gently. "I just recognized who you already were and gave you space to show it. All the strength, all the determination, all the success. That was always in you. You just needed someone to believe in you until you could believe in yourself. Delilah leaned her head on his shoulder, watching their children play in the golden light of the setting sun. Samuel was 3 now, full of energy and curiosity, always asking questions and exploring. Grace was barely a year old but already showing signs of her brother's adventurous spirit. "We made a good life," she said softly. "We made a great life." Warren kissed the top of her head. "And we are going to make it even better." Years passed in a blur of work and children and love. Samuel grew into a bright boy who loved books as much as his mother and horses as much as his father. Grace became a whirlwind of energy and laughter, keeping everyone on their toes. Delilah's bakery continued to expand, eventually becoming the largest in the region. She hired women who needed work, giving them the same kind of chance she had been given. Warren eventually bought a small ranch of his own, fulfilling the dream he had carried since childhood. It was not large or fancy, but it was his, and he built it with his own hands and the skills he had accumulated over years of hard work. He raised horses there, training them with patience and skill, building a reputation that brought buyers from across Colorado. They added to their family over the years, welcoming 2 more sons. Daniel, named after Delilah's brother despite their estrangement, and William, named after Warren himself. Their house, which had once seemed adequately sized, became crowded and chaotic and full of life. When Samuel turned 16, the same age Warren had been when his own father left him behind, Warren took his son on a camping trip into the mountains. Around the campfire one night, he told Samuel the story of how he had met Delilah, about the promise he had made to Samuel West, about the importance of being the person who slows down and walks beside others when they cannot keep pace. "That is how you live a good life, son," Warren said. "Not by always being first, not by leaving others behind so you can get ahead, but by recognizing when someone needs help and being willing to give it, even when it is not convenient or easy. That is the legacy I want to leave you." Samuel, who had inherited his father's thoughtful nature and his mother's compassionate heart, took the lesson to heart. He grew into a man who embodied those values, who helped neighbors in need, who stood up for those who could not stand up for themselves. Delilah's brother Daniel eventually came through Leadville on another wagon train, this one heading to the California gold fields that had opened up. He stopped at the bakery, not knowing it was run by his sister. When Delilah emerged from the back to find him standing in her shop, they both froze. The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of hurt and abandonment. Then Daniel said, his voice rough, "Delilah, I have thought about you every day since we left you behind. I have regretted it every single one of those days." Delilah could have held onto her anger. She would have been justified in turning him away, in refusing to acknowledge him. But she thought about what Warren had taught her about compassion and second chances, and she chose forgiveness. "Would you like some coffee?" she asked quietly. They talked for hours, Daniel pouring out his guilt and shame about leaving her behind, about how he had convinced himself it was necessary, about how he had been wrong. Delilah told him about Warren, about the life she had built, about how being left behind had ultimately been the best thing that could have happened to her. "I am glad you are well," Daniel said finally. "I am glad you found happiness, even though I did not deserve to be part of it." "Everyone deserves second chances," Delilah said. "You made a mistake, a terrible one that hurt me deeply. But you are my brother, and if you want to be part of my life now, I am willing to try." Daniel stayed in Leadville for a few weeks, getting to know his nieces and nephews, meeting Warren and being impressed by the man his sister had married. When he finally left to continue his journey, it was with a promise to write and to visit again when he could. The relationship was not what it had been in childhood, might never be fully healed, but it was something, and sometimes something was enough. As Delilah approached 40, she began to slow down, letting her children and employees handle more of the day-to-day operations of the bakery. She and Warren spent more time together, taking long walks and rides, remembering the early days of their relationship, marveling at how far they had come. "You ever regret it?" Delilah asked one evening as they sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. "Stopping for me that day. Your life might have been simpler if you had just ridden past." Warren turned to look at her with those sage-colored eyes that still made her heart skip after all these years. "Regret it? Delilah, stopping for you was the best decision I ever made. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You and our children and this life we built together." "How could I possibly regret any of it? I love you," she said, the words as true now as they had been the first time she said them. "I love you too. I have loved you since the day I saw you refuse to give up even when everything was against you. I will love you until the day I die and probably beyond that too." Their eldest son, Samuel, eventually took over managing the bakery, showing the same business acumen his mother had demonstrated. Grace married a teacher who had come to Leadville to open a school, and together they educated the children of miners and ranchers alike. Daniel became a skilled horse trainer like his father, while William surprised everyone by developing a talent for baking that rivaled his mother's. As Delilah and Warren grew older, they often reflected on the improbable journey that had brought them together. A wagon train, a fever, a moment of being left behind, a cowboy who chose to stop, a promise kept, a life built from nothing into something beautiful and lasting. "We should write it all down," Delilah said one day. "Our story. So our grandchildren know where they came from, know that good things can come from terrible moments if you are willing to see the possibilities." Warren agreed, and together they spent the next year recording their history. Delilah wrote most of it, her neat script filling page after page with their story. Warren would read what she had written and add details, correct her memory when needed, remind her of moments she had forgotten. When they finished, they had a complete account of their lives together, from that first meeting on the trail to the present day. It was a love story, yes, but it was also a story about second chances and keeping promises and choosing to slow down when the world demands you speed up. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were now 8 grandchildren, with another on the way, a whole new generation that carried forward the legacy of Warren and Delilah. As the party wound down and the grandchildren were put to bed, Delilah and Warren found themselves alone on the porch once more, watching the stars come out in the vast Colorado sky. 30 years, Warren said, shaking his head in wonder. "It has gone so fast." "And yet it feels like I have known you forever," Delilah replied. "Like my life before you was just preparation for everything that came after. You remember what I told you that first night, that you needed to build a life you were proud of before you could share it with someone else." "I remember." "Were you able to do that? Build a life you are proud of?" Delilah thought about the bakery that had fed thousands of people over the years, about the jobs she had created for women who needed them, about the children she had raised who were good and kind and hardworking. She thought about the community she had helped build, the friendships she had nurtured, the difference she had made in her own small corner of the world. "Yes," she said. "I built a life I am very proud of, but it is not just my life, Warren. It is our life. Everything I accomplished because you believed I could, because you slowed down and walked beside me when I needed it most. We built this life together, and that is what makes it so precious." Warren pulled her close, and they sat together in the gathering darkness. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something that would last long after they were gone. Years later, when Warren was in his 70s, he fell ill. It was not sudden or dramatic, just the slow wearing down that comes with age and a lifetime of hard work. Delilah tended to him with the same fierce determination she had brought to everything else in her life, refusing to accept that he might leave her. But Warren knew his time was coming. One evening, with Delilah sitting beside his bed holding his hand, he said, "I need you to promise me something." "Anything," Delilah said, tears streaming down her face. "Promise me that you will keep living after I am gone, really living, not just existing. You have got so many good years left in you. Do not waste them grieving for an old cowboy who got to spend 35 years loving the most amazing woman in the world." "I cannot promise that," Delilah sobbed. "I do not know how to live without you." "Sure you do. You knew how to live before you met me, and you will know how after I am gone. You are strong enough to survive anything, Delilah. You always have been." He squeezed her hand weakly. "And I will not really be gone. I will be in the sunset over the mountains, in the smell of bread baking, in the laughter of our grandchildren. I will be everywhere you look, as long as you choose to see me." Warren passed away peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by his family. Delilah held his hand until the very end, whispering words of love and gratitude for the life they had shared. The grief was overwhelming at first, a crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. But Delilah remembered her promise, and slowly, painfully, she began to live again. She continued working at the bakery when she felt up to it, teaching her grandchildren to bake, sharing stories about their grandfather. She rode out to the ranch regularly, finding peace in the wide open spaces Warren had loved, and gradually she found that Warren had been right. He was not really gone. She felt him in the early morning when she started her baking, in the evenings when she watched the sunset, in every moment of joy and laughter with her family. He had become part of the fabric of her life so completely that his absence was a presence, a constant reminder of how deeply she had been loved. Delilah lived another 12 years after Warren's death, long enough to see her great-grandchildren born, long enough to watch the bakery celebrate its 50th anniversary. She remained sharp and engaged right up until the end, still offering advice and wisdom to anyone who asked. When she finally passed away at the age of 86, it was peacefully in her sleep, with her family gathered around her. Her last words, spoken to her granddaughter who sat vigil at her bedside, were, "Tell them it was a good life. Tell them love is worth every risk." Delilah was buried next to Warren in the small cemetery, on a hillside overlooking Leadville. Their shared headstone bore a simple inscription: "Warren West Wheeler and Delilah Carson Wheeler, beloved parents and grandparents." He slowed down. She walked beside him together. They built a life worth living, but their real legacy was not carved in stone. It lived on in their descendants, in the businesses they had founded, in the values they had instilled. It lived on in every person who chose to slow down for someone struggling to keep pace, in every act of kindness that echoed the promise Warren had made to Samuel West all those years ago. The bakery remained in the family for 3 generations, each new owner adding their own touches while maintaining the core values Delilah had established. The ranch Warren built became a training ground for young cowboys, teaching not just riding and roping but the importance of character and keeping one's word. And the story of how Warren and Delilah met, of a cowboy who stopped for a stranger, and a woman who turned being left behind into a new beginning, was passed down through the generations. It became a family legend, a reminder that the worst moments of our lives can become the beginning of our best ones if we have the courage to see the possibility and the wisdom to accept help when it is offered. Delilah had been left behind because she could not keep pace. Warren had slowed down and walked beside her. And from that simple act of kindness had grown a love that spanned decades, a family that numbered in the dozens, and a legacy that would endure long after both of them were gone. It was, as Delilah had said with her last breath, a good life. More than good. It was a life well lived, built on love and hard work and the simple but profound choice to be the person who stops when others keep moving, who reaches out a hand when others turn away, who believes in possibilities when everyone else sees only limitations. That was the real story of Warren and Delilah Wheeler, the cowboy and the woman he saved who ended up saving him right back. Not a perfect story, but a true one. Not a fairy tale, but something better, a real love that had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs, and proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the moments when we choose to slow down and walk beside someone who needs us, even if it means changing all our plans. And in the end, that choice, that simple decision to stop and help a stranger in need, had made all the difference. Not just for Delilah, whose life was transformed, but for Warren, who found in her the partner and love he had been searching for without knowing it. And for all the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who came after, who carried forward the lessons learned and the values instilled, who understood that true strength is not found in always being first, but in having the wisdom to know when to slow down and the courage to walk beside those who cannot keep the pace. It was a legacy built on love, and it endured long after the last page of their story was written, living on in hearts and minds and actions, a ripple of kindness spreading out across the years, touching lives they would never know, making the world just a little bit better because once, on a dusty trail in Colorado, a cowboy made a choice to stop instead of riding on, and that choice changed everything.